عکسیه که همیشه خندون بودیم ما همیشه شاد بودیم ما زندگی خوب داشتیم ما دو زوج خوشبخت بودیم که با هم زندگی خیلی خوبی داشتیم آرزو آمون نرسیدیم دیگه آرزو آمون تموم بود.
A very sad personal story from Iran. That gentleman's wife and 175 other people lost their lives when the Iranian military shot down their plane last week. He calls the government killers, as do these Iranian protesters. But the head of the Revolutionary Guard says the downing of the Ukrainian passenger jet over Tehran was an honest mistake made during heightened tensions with the United States. We're going to be hearing from our guests in Iran and the United Kingdom in a moment, but first a reminder of how we got here.
معلوم نیست هواپیما هواپیما بابا این
A Ukrainian plane carrying 176 people has crashed shortly after taking off from the Iranian capital of Tehran. Everyone on board has died.
Iranian media reports say the aircraft came down due to technical problems. One official said it had been on fire.
But as the mourning continues, there's mounting doubt that mechanical failure really was the cause.
It happened just hours after Iran fired missiles targeting U.S. forces in neighboring Iraq.
The missile strikes were a revenge attack after President Trump's decision to assassinate one of Iran's top generals, Qasem Soleimani.
Somebody could have made a mistake. Some people say it was mechanical. I personally don't think that's even a question, personally.
The evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile.
What we can say with absolute certainty is that no missile has hit this plane.
Iran is still denying responsibility, but new video has surfaced appearing to show the moment a missile hits.
After days of denials and under mounting international pressure, the country now says its armed forces unintentionally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner this week, killing everyone on that flight.
The government says they mistook the plane for a missile.
و موقعی که اطمینان پیدا کردم که این اتفاق افتاده
Protests erupted in Iran today after its stunning admission.
With one tragic blunder, Iran has turned a wave of popular support into a tide of anti-government fury.
Well, this story raises so many questions. Why did Iran mislead its own people and the world for 3 days? Why was the airspace even open at a time of heightened tensions? And can Iran be trusted to carry out a real investigation? Let's bring in our guest now. And in Iran, we have the academic Saeed Mustafa Hoshem. We're also joined by the aviation expert and former RAF commander, Di Whittingham. Saeed Mustafa, if I could start with you. Let me quote to you what's been coming out in the past few minutes from the Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif. He's acknowledged that Iranians were lied to for several days and that he and the president were kept in the dark. Do you think there was some split between the military and the political leadership of Iran?
I appear in my own personal capacity, but here I am now to say that I'm editor-in-chief of Fars News Agency, and I take the responsibility of editor-in-chief of a news agency to tell you that Mr. Zarif has been misquoted for sure. He says these people have taken to the streets after they came to believe that they were lied to. He never says that the Iranians have been lied to. He says they came to believe that they have been told a lie. That's why they have taken to the streets. But the reality is that, he says, his words in quote unquote, the reality is that if you just take a look at similar cases, this issue has been revealed to the public even very soon and rapidly. That's his wording. And I put my name on that.
The fact is, the Iranian account only came out 3 days later and well after the Americans and Canadians said they had intelligence proving it was Iran, and only after the public could see the circumstantial evidence, both in video and in still images, all over the internet, which allowed independent aviation analysts to say it was clearly shot down and was not a result of mechanical failure.
The Iranian officials say that they were not under the impact of the U.S. or any other one, but they were running an investigation. The investigation takes time for the military, at least a couple of days, of course. And of course, that was a military, investigation. When you are under attack in warlike situation with the United States, then you need to keep the circle closed. They have their own drills and protocols until final investigation is done and the result appears. So it takes 2-3 days. And I said in similar cases, it's taken, the fastest has been in 7 days. But but there are clues to prove that the Iranians were running an investigation and would let the public immediately. One is that they never tried to hide anything from the Ukrainians, from others. They invited the Ukrainian investigation team the next day, actually. They invited the representative of Boeing. They invited the representative of the Canadian investigation team to Tehran to run an investigation. Right now, they have agreed to send the black box to Ukraine. So if they meant to hide anything, they would have never invited anyone.
Let us bring in
that we are on warlike situation.
Let's bring in an aviation expert now, Di Whittington. You've been following the story. You've seen whether or not the Iranian officials have been behaving in the normal way after a crash. What do you make of it?
When you have any aircraft that comes down in unexplained circumstances, the signatories to the Chicago Convention on Commercial Aviation, which set up ICAO, will have what's called an Annex 13 investigation, which is why the Iranian authorities will have invited the Ukrainians as the state of the operator, the NTSB from the USA as the state of manufacture, Boeing as a representative, and so on. There were indications from some of the photographs that had been published on the web very early on, before the video came out, which showed damage that was pretty consistent with a missile strike. So certainly that was my initial suspicion, was that something had gone wrong on the air defense side. And then we come back to the circumstances where there is heightened tension. So you would expect that the air defense system around a capital where the population and certainly the government feel that it is under threat, that it's beleaguered, it has been threatened with retaliatory action from another state, you would not be surprised if the defenses were on a heightened state of readiness.
Now, if the Iranians were really expecting retaliation from the United States, wouldn't it have been prudent to shut down the airspace completely?
You could do that, but of course that implies that you're closing your entire system, including overflight. And not all countries would want to do that. It's not always necessary, but clearly you have, if you like, taken the safety catch off the system.
And of course, Iranian officials remain adamant. They've been honest about how they've handled this whole affair. Here's the head of the Revolutionary Guard.
We ourselves were the primary source of this theory that our rocket may have hit the plane, due to the two events happening concurrently. And if we ourselves were not the reason behind the forming of this theory, no one would have been able to realize this.
He's basically saying that if Iran were not so transparent, the world would never have guessed that it was an Iranian surface-to-air missile which brought it down. And he's saying that even though he knows that the Americans and the United States have the intelligence to point towards Iran already.
He is. It's an interesting position to take. As I say, the photographs that were available on the internet very early on were indicative of some form of missile attack. The fact that the transmissions from the aircraft stopped so abruptly was another indication that there'd been a major disruption within the aircraft. And at that stage, you wouldn't know whether it was perhaps a bomb on board or whether it was an external event or some other major catastrophe. But this is a good airplane, the 737-800. It was a fairly new aircraft. It was very unlikely, just been maintained. It was very unlikely just to have fallen apart in the sky. And again, with the indications that the aircraft had crashed in flames, it was seen to be in flames before it hit the ground, is another good indication that there'd been a major disruptive event occurring with that airframe. And typically that's either a bomb or it's a missile.
Let's just take a moment now to look more closely at the video and data that we have of the incident. Ukraine International Flight 752 took off from Imam Khomeini Airport just outside Tehran at 12 minutes past 6 in the morning on Wednesday, the 8th of January. Barely 2 minutes after takeoff, its signal was lost to air traffic controllers. The plane, carrying 176 passengers and crew, had taken off into the northwest, rising to just over 4,500 feet from the ground before it quickly started to lose altitude. A video verified by the New York Times shows what happened. In this clip, filmed from roughly here, something streaks through the sky from the northwest. It's believed to be an Iranian surface-to-air missile. Then, an explosion as the missile blows up right next to the plane. The plane continues to fly for some moments, veering off course. It apparently attempted to turn back in the direction of the airport, but crashed here, approximately 16 kilometers from where its last signal was recorded. This CCTV video from near the crash scene shows the destruction. There's also CCTV footage of an apparent rocket launch from military bases north of the airport. American intelligence claims that 2 missiles were fired at the plane. Well, here's what the Ukraine International Airlines vice president emphasized during a press conference recently. He said that the plane had followed a perfectly normal flight route with no deviation. Let's have a listen.
This is the trajectory of all of the other planes who fly from the Tehran airport for that day. This is the PS 752 from the 2nd of November to 8th of January. This is all of our flights, all of the flights that our aircraft has covered through since that moment. The red is the trajectory and the route for our plane. There was not a single deviation from the routes that some people might hint.
Now you can understand the Ukrainians' frustration. They cannot understand why their plane of all planes was shot down.
I completely understand why the Iranian authorities would want to have missile defenses around its capital when it feels itself to be under threat. What you would normally expect is that the command and control system will know where friendly traffic, and that by friendly I mean their own aircraft and those that are innocents, neutral parties and whatever, where those would be flying. So the fact that this aircraft was following a published departure route from an international airport suggests that the system had been told there was perhaps no operation to be expected. And if you're not having anybody flight planned to be departing the airport between this hour and that hour, then it would be very reasonable for an operator out on his own in the field to assume that a blip that pops up on his screen is likely to be hostile.
And there is video that shows a second missile probably did hit or explode near the plane just 30 seconds later. Is that an automatic thing?
I am completely unsurprised by that. If you consider that when the individual who pulled the trigger had been given to understand that it was a hostile target, as far as he's concerned, then the fact that there is still a radar blip showing on his screen means that the first missile hasn't worked. So to fire a second would be entirely normal in this sort of operation.
Given that there have been a number of statements from the Iranian officials, which have then had to be corrected. Do you trust Iran to hold a full and transparent investigation?
I think you have to put yourself in the shoes of the Iranians here. It's a very sensitive time. We know that there are significant tensions in the region. I don't think it would be in the Iranians' interest to fully reveal whatever shortcomings had occurred within that command and control system. Now you go back to the relatives, they want to know what's happened. I don't think they're going to get much beyond it was hit by a missile and it was a mistake.
Let's bring in some of the video of the protests in Iran. Here's what they were chanting on January the 11th, the day Iranian officials finally admitted shooting down the plane.
دروغ میگن آمریکاست دشمن ما همینجاست.
Back up to Said now in Tehran. Said, when they say our enemy is right here, who are they referring to, and what is the significance of the word enemy in Iran?
Well, the few thousand that took to the streets to shout that, well, of course, they mean the state. There is no doubt about that. And it's, free state. Everyone can, shout the grievances that they have as far as they do not harm the other people's freedom and they do not damage the other public and private properties, of course. But in democracies, democracy is a rule of the majority. So the 25 million people who supported and showed their strong support for the government, they should have their voice too. So these people were out because they came to believe that they were lied, and they had, of course, some other grievances for sure. But this does not at all mean that they don't have the freedom, of course, to say their grievances. They should be given the ploy, and they have had the ploy as far as they do not harm other people's freedom. That's the notion that they have developed under media propaganda of Iran's enemy. Iran is at a war with the United States, technically, not only at a war of economy, but also at a war of military war right now. They've declared war on Iran when they assassinated Qasem Soleimani.
Were the protesters free in November when hundreds of them were shot dead?
Well, first of all, no one has given out the report about the number of the dead so far in the November protests. Sure, people have grievances. There were some people who had economic grievances. They were out, they were shouting protests against the government. Nothing happened until a bunch of guys from the United States and the US and the MKO, the Mujahideen Khalq organization, as well as the supporters of monarchist Reza Pahlavi, they have all admitted that their networks have been operating in Iran. They started attacking IRGC bases, police stations, gas stations. They broke the windows of government buildings as well as banks and set fire and arson attacks on public and private properties. Well, what would you expect the police to do when they come under
Reuters news
fire?
Agency says
The police were also
1,500 were shot dead.
A number of the law enforcement police were killed.
So Reuters news agency says 1,500
Well, that
were
was
shot
Reuters.
dead. Tell me what the Iranian government official figure is for the number of protesters killed in November.
They have not given out the numbers, but they have said that there have been three groups of the dead. First, those that opened fire on the police and IRGC. Second, the police that were in a fight with them. But the Iranian top security official says most of the casualties have been civilians who were not doing, sabotage, but some under suspicious circumstances as they received gunshots from behind from close range 1.5 yards with handguns armed with silencers. So there needs to be a thorough investigation to realize who has done all this and how many people have been killed by the government, or how many, under what circumstances, and how many others have been killed by the government or by those that have been the rioters and or those that have been killed under suspicious circumstances. And of course, Iran's constitution allows everyone to get to the streets to shout whatever they want unless they hurt the freedom of others, they damage public and private properties, or insult others. As far as they stay within the law and shout protests, they are completely free to do whatever they want to do.
I think a lot of people will find that an extremely difficult statement to substantiate when they have heard accounts of hundreds of people being shot dead and have seen the video evidence of the same.
Who says hundreds of people? Reuters? Well, let me have your email address to send you tens of fake reports by Reuters about Iran. Some have been excluded from their archives. Some still are online. I can send you the links, and I would be happy to send you the links. But here is a fact that I believe the situation in Iran is not black and white. It's gray, completely gray. Sometimes it's darker gray, sometimes it's lighter gray. It depends on what the topic you're talking about. Here, if we're talking about the pro-establishment, community to see how many people are supporting the government, well, whatever I say, no matter I say a majority are still supporting the government or not, and the establishment or not, you could see the reality for yourself next month in February 11 rallies, celebrating the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution. I would be more than happy to join you here live to cover, the footage to see if millions of people are out or not. 2 months, less than 2 months from now, there will be elections. You would see the turnout, and of course, you could cover that. I would be happy to join you to comment on that. And of course, who the people would choose, that matters a lot. If they are going to elect President Rouhani, the moderate camp, the reformists, I doubt. Because the United States is already heightening the situation. The Europeans are joining the United States. They have left a very negative impact on the election choice and the political taste of the Iranians.
Let me ask you about the United States. Now, President Trump has been tweeting his support for these protesters in Farsi, warning Iranian leaders not to kill protesters and to leave the internet on. Do you think this has helped or harmed?
Negative impact, honestly. One of the people who had been in prison for several months, she tweeted, please stay away from us. We don't want you. He received answers from the American citizens who mocked at him, saying that, okay, you banned their travel to the United States, you place tough sanctions on the Iranian people, some in urgent need of medicine that is only produced in the United States, some others are in urgent need of pharmaceutical products that they cannot import to the country because of the banking sanctions, especially kids with rare diseases. They are dying, losing their lives. And that's because of Donald Trump and the United States bans and sanctions in this country.
You say people find him unpopular and so on. I'm sure there are. But it was also one of his tweets in Farsi was the most liked tweet in Farsi in history.
I don't think so. I say it again. Donald Trump is not a favored person here. Not among Iranians here, nor among many others abroad, non-Iranians. They know him pretty well. He's been a source of chaos and disorder.
Zaid Mustafa Hoshem and Di Whittingham, thank you for your contributions to the Nexus. Appreciated. We've talked about the investigation, the politics. We need to remember, of course, that this all matters because so many people lost their lives on that plane. The majority were Iranian nationals. A large number of Canadians too, as well as Ukrainians, Swedes, British, Afghans. 176 people in all, including Mohammad Reza Zadeh, who ran a small business in the south of England. We'd like to leave you with this report from his community. Thank you for watching.
For 14 years, Iranian-born Mohammad Reza Zadeh had owned and run the only dry cleaning business in Hassex. So when he didn't return from his Christmas holiday to Iran last week, His customers were shocked.
Well, when I heard the plane had been shot down or been knocked down, it upset me. But when I saw his picture in the paper, I was absolutely horrified. He seems such a quiet, nice man. He's going to be a great loss to the community.
Next door at the pet centre, owner Stephen Edgington said he had a friendly relationship with the father of one, locally known as Reza. Stephen remembered the 40-year-old as someone hardworking and humble, who didn't even mind when the cats wandered in next door.
He really was the sort of man you couldn't really dislike. You know, he was just so nice. He was quietly spoken, you know. I never heard him raise his voice or shout in the 14 years I was here.
Before our visit, Reza's father had come to see Stephen. It was their first meeting since the crash.
It's so difficult to know what to say to someone that's just lost their only son, you know, in such devastating circumstances, you know. I just held him and you know, he cried.
It's business as usual this week at Smarties Express, but the shop was shut last Wednesday as employees came to terms with their loss and the tributes poured in. Over 3,000 miles from Tehran, who would have thought that this small British town would be affected by an international conflict?
You see these sort of flowers put outside buildings in London and big cities around the world where a major thing has happened within a capital city. I just don't expect to see it happening in a small village where I live.